This is Remember Guys.
Delay of game, defense number 55, making a move that is unnecessary and unlike football. It's half the distance to the penalty. Replay, remember that guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hey there, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Cleet Blakeman.
Cleet, I'm so glad to be here with you. I'm at Hockey Lee, and I was giving him the business down there, and we actually have a special guest who knows a lot about a lot of different businesses. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Ron Cherry. I actually do make sure we give people the business, but I'm not the real special guest. We have an actual legitimate special guest here. Please introduce yourself.
I didn't know we were having fun names, so I didn't come up with one.
I thought that we came up with a third official at all. I was like, we've gone through the two that I know the names of in football.
But I'm Jesse.
Welcome, Jesse. Everyone, this is my wife, Jesse. This is our second consecutive week of spousal appearances following Caitlin last week. And my dear, it is absolutely lovely to have you here.
It's also our third week of me being your wife, officially, right now, at 5:40.
Yeah, as of Monday, it'll be like 3.5. Just update you, listener, as you hear this. Okay, so we're going to do Making Memories right now, folks. And it's going to start with some massive bummers. I know everyone's been clamoring to hear from their favorite and perhaps only East Coast Spurs fan about what's going on. So Josh Primo is a piece of shit. We cut the audio of us last week discovering in real time as we recorded that he got cut. We said at that moment, there's probably something going on if that's happening out of nowhere. They just picked up his third-year option. So that's weird. And something was up. We were right. Josh Primo has allegedly been exposing himself to pretty much everybody. Most notably, or I guess most egregiously, to the team psychiatrist, Dr. Hillary Cauthen, who is now being represented by Tony Busby. If anyone recognizes his name, that is because he is also the lawyer for dozens of women against Deshaun Watson. Houston and that area really having a moment right now. Like we said, Dr. Hillary Cauthen is the one that's coming forward about what has been happening for nearly a year now. I'm going to present the time. I don't know how much you guys have kept up with the full timeline of this, but it goes back to December 2021. It's the first time that during a therapy session, whipped it out. So that was bad, and she immediately went to HR. And finally in January of this year, 2022, gets with GM Brian Wright, who is not the head of the franchise, but he's kind of been set up to take over when Buford and Pop eventually dip out. And so Brian Wright gets a meeting with her, and Brian Wright recommended that they set up a meeting with all parties, including Josh Primo, so they could figure out what it was that was compelling him to expose himself to her.
That's not going to help anything.
No, this is also right around in March when Wright gets a fawning profile in the Athletics 40 under 40 series. And wouldn't you know it, he's very, very proud of going out on a limb to recently draft Josh Primo. It was a bit of a reach when he took him. So he's put a lot of stock into Josh Primo, this incredibly young, raw player. So within 2 weeks of then, Cauthen finally got involved in another meeting where nothing has happened. Allegedly, during this entire time, she's being asked to continue treating Josh Primo. During the entirety of what we're going to discuss, he exposed himself to her 9 times.
Great.
Wright gets an extension during this time. Later on, Cauthen is going to get basically fired. In June, I should specify that this is Wright claiming to Cauthen, based on her testimony, that Pop was aware of her complaint and accusations and that he wanted to do right by her. That's a quote from Busby. That is hard to square with what happens next because she's informed that Primo's going to be in the Summer League team. She will not be with the Summer League because they don't think that she can work with the team due to a lack of trust between her and the team. Later, like I said, they pick up 3-year option for Primo when they played in Minnesota a couple games into the season. This is when it started like breaking on Spurs Twitter because someone on Reddit that lived in Minnesota commented about a friend of theirs that they knew that worked at where the Spurs had been staying, where reportedly found out that he'd exposed himself to housekeeping. This all starts getting out. He's held out due to phantom injuries for a game. He got cut last week while we were doing this as this broke out because finally Wright was not going to be able to hide this anymore. This is after supposedly also some incidents in Las Vegas during that summer league when Colton wasn't there. So, yeah, all of this sucks. Brian Wright, fuck you, get off the Spurs immediately. Like, quit. Buford and Pop should have fired him if they have that ability. Buford, as I understand it, would be the person who has that ability. He should already be fired. He should also quit. He should also fire himself into the sun. Primo's 19. He shouldn't be in the NBA, but like that, for now, honestly, is an enormous punishment. This is fucked up. And his statements from his lawyer are a complete joke. It looks like maybe this had been hidden from Buford and Pop. Busby says he doesn't think that when they told Coffin in June that Pop was actually aware of it. He claims that's a lie. Maybe that's true. I don't know, man. It fucking sucks to be a Spurs fan right now. It's absolutely horrid. I was thinking a lot about a related case with Sean Watson. And I don't blame people who stick with teams after life scandal with this, because I've been a fan of the Spurs for not that long of a time. I've been a fan of the Spurs, though, longer than Brian Wright's been involved with it at all. You know, people who were fans of the Browns for decades, they don't have to stop being fans of it because of a decision they made. You can't celebrate it, though. And, like, the way that Cleveland has still celebrated having Deshaun Watson, that's what's gross about that. To San Antonio's credit, I don't live in San Antonio, so I don't know how it is in the streets, but I know online everyone's at least disgusted by this. I don't know. I don't know I didn't watch any of the clobbering against Toronto, the worst loss in the Pop era immediately following this. I don't know how much Spurs I'll watch this year. I don't know. It all sucks. That's what's making memories for me right now.
Stopping you from making memories.
The one comment that I would make on it, kind of just following up on what you were just saying, like, we've talked about it on this podcast before. Fandom is inherently emotional and not logical, right? There's no logical reason why we should care so much about these people that we've never met. We don't really know anything about them, but we care very greatly about them putting more points on the scoreboard than their opponents. And when a case like this comes up, it shows just how little we do know about these people. Obviously, the most immediate greatest shame is that a Spurs employee has gone through all of this and was essentially blamed for it, for like not being a quote unquote team player, you know, just letting it persist because the team doesn't want this big controversy. Yeah, to your point, not great. Like, there is a world where the first time this happens, she goes to leadership. Leadership says, yo, what the fuck? They suspend Primo. Is this a helpable condition? Maybe. Maybe it's something that could be helped with. I don't want to entirely dismiss the mental health thing that he is now claiming. But it's one thing to claim it very initially, like, I don't know why I did this. It's another thing to claim it after you've done this, as you said, 9 fucking times and been enabled by the organization along the way. So
I think there's also something to be said about using mental health as an excuse or a reason. Like, you can deal with mental health issues, but when it starts to affect the people around you, there's still personal responsibility that just throwing the word like, oh, it's my mental health, I'm going through, like, you aren't allowed to use that as an excuse. It can be a reason, but it can't be an excuse to get out of punishments or consequences.
Especially not if it happens repeatedly over a prolonged period.
Yeah.
Even if it was one time and he was having some sort of like mental crisis, that doesn't insulate him from consequence. But 100%. The fact that it was a repeated thing makes that really, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. I have mental health issues. I know many people have mental health issues. We have bad times, but as far as I know, I have not exposed myself to anyone one time, let alone many. And I would never blame mental health for that thing. So I was very dismayed by the use of that as an excuse, because I feel like I've seen that as a trend recently where celebrities or people in positions of power will do something bad and then blame a mental health thing. And I feel like it puts a bad stigma on everyone who's dealing with mental health issues.
Well, people always make the direct comparison between like physical health. A physical health issue will be more apparent, right? And like the analogy here to me is an athlete could say, I have a broken ankle and that's why I can't play. And nobody's going to question that, right? But if the athlete refuses to rehab it and refuses to get surgery and is not taking any steps to rectify that issue, then they don't deserve to play anymore, right? Like, it's not like I'm not going to just put you back out there. A physical injury is a reason why you cannot perform, but it's not an excuse to not work on it, right? So, I mean, that's just the analogy I would make. I don't fault any Spurs fans who are staying with the team. And it's so weird how when this first came out, the reaction was kind of, good on the Spurs for getting ahead of this. This seems like it was a thing that other organizations maybe would have tried to bury, but the Spurs tried to get ahead of it. And just the more we learn, the more we realize, no, they did try to bury this, and they're kind of just at the very last second trying to save face. So, not a great situation. Very, very unfortunate, and we can only hope that this will serve as an example for any future incidents of future predators in the NBA, that they will be dealt with swiftly, and excuses won't be made, and there won't be walls put up and obfuscation and all that.
Brian Wright sucks. I hope he dies.
Well, speaking of, great things going on in the NBA world, Xavier, I think there was another thing that you wanted to discuss.
Well, with the NBA world, I'm glad I'm not a Nets fan, because if I was, I would be even more ashamed than James right now. I don't know how you have massive anti-Semitism issue and then say, oh, let's hire guys suspended for inappropriate sexual contact or whatever it actually was, because the Celtics refused to tell us, and make him our head coach.
One point of clarification before you go too far in. That has actually not been finalized yet. They might turn around and do the right thing.
Well, if they do, it's only because they got backlash. It wasn't going to be. They thought that they could do it. If it doesn't actually happen, they thought that they could.
Of course. I just wanted to, and it might be final by Monday, and maybe we cut this whole thing that I just said. But recording, the Nets are only very evil and not 100% evil.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into it because it's just such an awful situation. But if you want to know why what Kyrie did was so bad, please read the article written by Drew Majeri for SF Gate. It's a fantastic article. He sat through the 3.5 hour quote-unquote documentary, so you don't have to. It's really bad. There's a reason why people say it's bad. So if you need more information, please look at that, but I don't want to get too much into that.
The least problematic person on the Nets is named David Duke. David Duke is the chillest guy on the Nets.
I mean, if we can change what the Google results are.
That's his dream. That's literally David Duke's dream. He's said that.
Well, we should make that happen for him.
And I do also want to shout out Yuta Watanabe, is a very joyful basketball player for the Nets who seemingly has no transgressions. So I would throw Yuta in there with the real David Duke. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing that we can say that a million people haven't already said much better than us. But, I think I would just like to say on behalf of the Remember That Guy podcast, both my co-hosts, fuck Kyrie Irving. That's the official statement of this podcast.
You know who else sucks? FIFA. FIFA sucks. And I want to say this now because in 2 weeks the World Cup will start. And because we are sports fans, especially Diaz and I as soccer fans, we will watch because we are just the peasants. We don't get to watch our teams play soccer that often, especially since the USA did not make the World Cup last time. But it is important to never forget the fact that it is an actual travesty that it's being held in Qatar. I could go on for about 12 hours about all of the awful reasons why it should not be held in Qatar. We can talk about the fact that they rigged the vote initially, the fact that they paid an ex-CIA officer $400 million to spy on FIFA, The fact that it's a country where if a woman has sex outside of marriage, she can be flagellated and then sent to jail for 7 years. Homosexuality is punishable by death. They've killed 6,000 migrants while working on the stadiums.
They forced the World Cup into November. Like,
Yes.
obviously that's low on the scale. It should be the last thing on the list. But that's also an absurdly bad thing.
There's an article on The Athletic called What Was Promised and Was Actually Being Delivered. It talks about the fact that there's a lot more worse stuff, but it's like, no, when they got the World Cup bid, they said that they were going to invent artificial clouds that can act as air conditioning for the entire country. That was part of their bid. They were going to invent artificial clouds.
For soccer?
Yes. They also said they were going to have a certain amount of stadiums, which they did not end up having. Certain number of transit, which they did not have. And, they're a small country, and they have 1 million people coming to visit. They do not have enough hotel rooms for everybody. They have built fan villages in the middle of the desert that are literally rows and rows of shipping containers that are going for $2,000 for like 4 days. It's just a shipping container in the desert. And they also are renting out cruise ships to dock off the coast because they cannot fit everybody. This is an absolute travesty that is going to be overshadowed because I'm sure that the games themselves will be good and people will like them because it happens only once every 4 years. But we can't forget that. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up now is because a thing came out yesterday where the president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, sent out an email to, I believe it was all the federations whose teams are coming, because 2 main reasons. One was some federations trying to get Iran replaced at the World Cup by Ukraine because Iran has been providing drones to kill Ukrainian civilians far away from the front lines of the Russian invasion. And 2, because there has been a lot of renewed talk about what could happen to LGBTQ plus fans going to watch their teams. This letter, and for context, just a couple months ago, Gianni Infantino said that this could be a Nelson Mandela-like moment where they bring liberalization to Qatar type stuff and how football can be a source of change, has now said that you should respect different cultures and differences of opinions, even when it means the quote-unquote opinion that being gay is immoral and punishable by death. So people are not very happy about that. I'm not very happy about that. 10 different captains of national teams have already committed to wearing a One Love armband that FIFA is now trying to ban. This is a bad time. And the U.S. will have the World Cup in 2026. We have our own issues too. Like, I'm not going to try to downplay that. But it really is a travesty, and I don't know what's even going to happen to the fans there. I don't know what's going to happen to the country after the World Cup's over. They don't need any of this stuff. They can't use any of this stuff. Are thousands more migrants going to die trying to tear things down and sell them for scrap? I don't know. I just want to talk about it now because I know that when the games start, people are going to be distracted, myself included. So I want to make sure that it's talked about. But this is another bummer, and I don't want to go on too much longer.
Fuck FIFA.
We wanted to lead off with those negatives so that now we can wash that horrible taste out of our mouth. Diaz, what you got for?
Well, as we continue down our list of sports transgressions, we have organizational abuse and protecting of players doing horrible things. We have protecting now finally they have suspended their anti-Semitic player, but we have rampant anti-Semitism in the NBA. FIFA, just ignoring every single red flag in the build-up to the Qatar World Cup. And now we're back down to transgressions that only happen on the field, where we talk about the Houston Astros, the cheating organization that does not deserve to have a single player that is still on their roster from sign-stealing gate, and who now find themselves, as we record, and when this episode releases, one way or another, it's going to be finalized. But as we record, the Astros are on the brink of winning the World Series against my Philadelphia Phillies. The one thing I need to compliment to the Philadelphia crowd, there were boisterous cheater chants every single time Altuve or Bregman came to the plate. Philadelphia certainly did not forget. We did our part there.
In particular, there were not cheater rants for everyone else, just heavy booing. Like, it's not like they let up on anybody, but they've done clearly the research into, okay, who specifically are the cheaters?
Exactly. Listen, Philadelphia, the one thing we have always said about us is we are a very intelligent fan base when it comes to the sports themselves. And I think that held up. In the 3 games in Philly. Tough game last night. Real tough game. God, I just wish that Trey Mancini was still on the Baltimore Orioles. Trey Mancini was still on the Baltimore Orioles. Kyle Schwarber's hit down the right field line. Goes in the corner. It scores 2 runs. And the Phillies would have gone on to win that game.
Here's my one counter argument. If Trey Mancini doesn't leave the Orioles, Trey Mancini still makes that play. He's just wearing an Orioles jersey, baby.
Fair enough. And you know what? And it would bring me much greater joy the Baltimore Orioles beating the Phillies 3-2 in the World Series versus the fraudulent, cheating Houston Astros. But, all that said, God, fucking Chas McCormick, who, by all accounts, I've seen a lot of people on Philadelphia Twitter and the Phillies subreddit who have loose connections to Chas McCormick. Apparently he's a douchebag, which not surprised. But goes back into Philly and makes that catch to get the second out last night. If that thing hits off the wall, JT's getting at least 3 bases. And that's an entirely different 9th inning as well. But I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. I might be proven an idiot by the time you're all listening to this episode. Really good. I feel really, really good about our chances going into Houston. Zach Wheeler has had a couple down performances. Some people would say that to indicate that, his arm's catching up to him. He might be getting tired. I take it to say he's due. Wheels is due. He's going to go in there in Game 6. And I think we're gonna have a hard-fought game that we're going to be able to pull out. I'm going to say 2-1. Game 6 victory. Wheels goes 7 innings, and we get the 2-1 victory. And Game 7, we got the calmest man in baseball, Ranger Suarez, on the mound. Ranger's going to deal. And Philly's going to bring it home. And we're going to have a parade. And the parade may even be... Actually, no, it wouldn't be the day that you're listening to this. Unless you listen to it a day late. I think it would end up being Tuesday. So stay tuned. Phillies are going to take care of it. If you're listening to this now, you already know whether or not they did or did not. But I'm telling you right now, go Phillies.
You know what the worst thing about this World Series is? The worst thing is that if the Astros win, Ted Cruz is happy. And if the Phillies win, Samuel Alito is happy.
Yeah, that was a big hit. The Samuel Alito appearance yesterday,
that made me
as Trey Mancini made a beautiful diving catch. I'm like, ooh, I am torn now.
Well, so here's what I say, right? The vibes plummeted the second that they showed Sam fucking Alito as a Phillies fan in the crowd. But Ted Cruz, panderer that he is, I need to assume he's going to be in attendance for Game 6 and 7. So now the vibes shift back to extremely negative for Texans. Let's hope that they don't get a cold snap there so fucking Teddy boy Rafael doesn't flee to Cancun again. If he's in the building, there's no way. If there is a God will not allow Ted Cruz to witness the Houston Astros winning the World Series. He just won't. Phil's in 7. Fuck Ted Cruz.
And here's you can also blame Samuel Alito now if things don't go badly. You do have a scapegoat.
We 100% do. And real quick, my Newcastle comment. October was an incredible month for Newcastle. We have 3 players up for Premier League Player of the Month. We have Kieran Trippier, who is going to be starring for England in the World Cup. We have Bruno Guimaraes, who will be starring for Brazil in the World Cup. But then we have Miguel Almiron, the Paraguayan. Paraguay did not qualify for the World Cup. But Miguel Almiron, for the uninitiated, when Man City won the title last year, Jack Grealish, who is everything that is wrong with soccer. If Jamie Tart in Ted Lasso was not directly inspired by Jack Grealish, they are nonetheless very, very analogous. Talented pretty boys who are actually assholes and are nowhere near as good as they think they are. Jack Grealish made a comment when he was wasted off his ass after they won the Premier League last year, saying, Arez, what were you doing out there? You were playing like Almiron. And this obviously rubbed a lot of our Newcastle fans wrong. Miguel Almiron is currently, I believe, third in the Premier League in goals. He has 6. Each successively got more impressive than the previous. And he is up for Premier League Player of the Month. And what is so heartwarming and touching about this Newcastle team, I love Bruno so much. When they announced the 3 Newcastle finalists for the Premier League Player of the Month, Bruno immediately tweeted out, and by the way, Bruno, this time a year ago, spoke 0 English and is now, like, I would say just a slight step below fluent. It's remarkable how quickly he has learned English and how good he has gotten at it. But he tweets out, hey, this is a great honor for me. It's a great honor for Trippier. But please vote for Miguel. He's having the time of his life, and we're also happy for him, and we want you to vote for Miguel. It's beautiful. Beautiful. The lads are being guys, and it's just wonderful to see. And Newcastle went 4th. If the season ended right now, we're going Champions League. The season ended right now. Xavier gets to lift the Premier League title, and I get to watch Newcastle in Champions League. So let's just keep that table right where it is, and let's get Miguel Almiron, the Premier League Player of the Month. If you're a listener of this podcast, please go vote for Miggy for Player of the Month.
I will do it after this recording. I commit that.
Thank you. But yes, Phillies going to be world champions by the time you're listening to this, and Miguel Almiron, you'll still be able to vote for him. So get those votes in. Ho way to lads, ho way to guys.
Jesse, I know you're not the biggest sports fan, but is there anyone making memories for you right now?
There is. So this is very topical because as of November 1st, the United States figure skater Star Andrews is the first Black woman in U.S. history to medal at the Grand Prix for figure skating, which is really exciting. She won silver. She's 21 years old, and it has never happened before for a African-American person in the Grand Prix. So that was really cool.
With a name like that, too, I mean,
It's a
whether
great
it was
name.
figure skating or any other sport, I mean, the Andrews parents called their shot there with that name.
It's Star with 2 R's as well. Like,
That's the best way. That's the best way to spell that.
right. But yeah, so that was really exciting because, like, I'm going to be talking about figure skating tonight, and there is a lot of prejudice in figure skating. It's a sport that really does not like outsiders, people who are not like expected to be in figure skating, and often the way that the judging works will really affect them. So it's just really exciting that so many changes have been happening over the last couple of years. And Star Jackson last year had to pull out of Worlds, which is what happens before the Grand Prix, because of an injury. And so it's just really nice to see that like she came back. 21 is like the middle of your career, so like it's really exciting that she's able to do that and like really be a role model for people who might want to try figure skating in the future.
It's wild to think that 21 is the middle of your career.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that a lot.
As a 29-year-old right now, I feel really, really old.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about that. Like, I don't know how much you want me to just jump into that now, but
I mean, if that is everything about Star making memories for you right now, then
that's all I really need to share about it.
Yeah, we don't need to bury the lead any further than that. By all means, you have come to us, the Guy-bunal, today with another for your consideration. And as we now understand it, this guy that you have brought for our consideration is a figure skater?
They are a figure skater. So like James said, I don't care about sports too much, but the one sport that I do thoroughly enjoy is figure skating. But figure skating is a little confusing, the way that the sport works. The scoring system itself is a whole thing, but I just want to talk about like how figure skating competitions work first. So there's qualifying competitions. If you win your qualifying competition, you are able to go to the national competitions. You must place in the top 3 in your national competitions to compete in the International Skating Union, or the ISU. The ISU championships are twofold. So you have the 4 continents, which is North America, South America, Asia, and Oceania. Is Oceania or Oceania? I don't know how to say that word.
Oceania.
Oceania. European continent and African continents are not allowed to compete in the 4 continents. And then there's the European competitions. That one is self-explanatory. There is none specifically for African continent.
Just about to ask. So you just don't get to figure skate in Africa.
Not in the ISU. They have their own part that can then eventually go to Worlds. Worlds is the most important part of figure skating. It is what everything leads up to for like the general skater. So the Worlds competitions also has the junior world competitions and the world synchronized skating competitions, but just Worlds is what everyone's going for. The top 6 winners of Worlds can then go to the Grand Prix, the most elite skaters in the entire world. So it has gone from your city to your state to your country to Worlds, and now we're at the Grand Prix. So that Star Andrews won this is like incredible. Like she's beat hundreds of other skaters to get there to get the silver medal. So she is the second best skater in the world, essentially.
And so just to understand, in theory, were there a very good African skater, they could make it to that Grand Prix, because that's not just ISU at that point.
Right. So the Grand Prix is still ISU, but there's a whole lot of other competitions. There's BISU. I'm just talking about like the ones that people will know about. Like these are the ones you'll see on TV. And there have been other like black skaters. She's just the first United States skater that was African American that medaled at competition. So that's why she's special. But all of this Worlds, Grand Prix, all of this has nothing to do with the Olympics, which is its own track that sometimes skaters will also be doing, that has its own scoring system. This also does not include showcases, performances, or tours, which don't happen until you go pro. You cannot compete in any of the other competitions if you are a professional.
This is complicated.
It's very complicated, which is why of my 8-page document, 1 full page is dedicated to this.
There's like no professional skater is competing whatsoever.
It's just a lot. There's a lot of things happening here. So some terms that I'm not going to bring up much, but I do want you guys to be aware of are the PCS and the TES, which are how things are scored. It's the program component scores and the technical element scores. A score for figure skating is based on a judging panel of usually 9 people. They are judging on 2 things. They're judging on your program and they're judging on your elements. So your program is the dance that you're doing. It's every step of the way, which you have choreographed at the beginning. You hand that in essentially as a piece of paper. Each move inside of that is scored. There's a new scoring system since 2004. We're going to be talking about the 80s and 90s. So we're going to be on the 6.0 scoring system. So they could be rated up to 6.0. That's a perfect score for any of those components. The judges are going along your program, and there are parts of your program that can be added onto, but you can't take things away. So while you're doing it, they could go for, let's say, an axle, which is a type of spin that you're jumping into, and then add a quad to it, which is a 4 rotation spin. That would make your points higher. So you're full as much as you can possibly do. That is what you've handed into them, and you're trying to get as close to perfect as possible. When skaters are competing, one skater could have a perfect score on their sheet. Like they've gone through their entire thing. It's perfect. But another skater who did not score as perfectly could still beat them because their baseline score could be higher and they could have hit that. Even though they didn't add anything, their numbers could still be higher. So you can like kind of figure that out from the beginning of like, okay, that person can only score, let's say 100 points. Like that is their highest they could make by adding everything. Mine, my lowest score would be 100 points. I could get up to 300 points by adding XYZ. So there's a game that's being played as that as well. You might have skaters that are at different levels, even though they're competing against each other. So there's a lot of things you have to be aware of. The other thing is judges can be voting based on bias for costume, technical element, the way that their bodies are landing on the ice. Like there's so many things that are happening that you have to both be respectful of the judges while you're on the ice. So how you're landing, if you're smiling at them when you're finishing, if you're facing the correct direction, there are many things that you have to be aware of while you're skating. When people are skating, they're thinking about the edge of their skate. So their skate blade is an upside down U. There's an inside blade and an outside blade. Depending on which blade edge you land on is what the type of land it is, so what kind of spin it is. So like a flip takes off from the back inside edge, but the toe loop starts from the back of the outside edge on the front foot. So like, you have to really be aware of where your feet are and how your body is moving at all times, because you might fumble and land on the wrong foot, and it's changed what your score is then because it's changed the type of move you've done. So that's a lot. So that's just kind of like the baseline I wanted to give you before I really jump into the story I would like to tell you, because I know figure skating is something that people like to watch, like they see it, but they don't
It's very
always
pretty.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they like I saw something yesterday when I was doing on my research. Someone's like, "Yeah, I don't really know anything about skating. Like, I'll be watching the Olympics, and she's like, wow, that was so beautiful. They're so graceful, and the judges are like, trash, horrible." And you're like, "Oh,
No,
geez."
That was
no
always the issue
idea.
with Jason Brown, right? Where everyone
Mhm.
thought it's beautiful, but because he didn't do all the jumps and stuff and just
Yeah,
focused on a beautiful
and
program, he always scored pretty low.
it also has to do with because like some of these skaters, they're watched by the judges all the way through from their national competition. If there's someone that's like, hey, this someone's going to be promising, and they think they're going to make it to Worlds, so they'll watch them all the way through. And if they think they can do something and they don't do it, they'll lose points. Like even if it was never in their choreography, like the judges just be like, you should have added that. No more points for you. So it can be a lot. I'm going to start telling my story now. So figure skating comes in many forms. Speed, dance, synchronized pairs, and singles being the main competitive form. Each rely on a scoring system that starts from the moves that you're planned, modified, and completed, then costumes, artistry, and ability. Your planned program has the highest number of available points, and if you make all of the moves you planned, you can go up or down depending on how closely you stick to the program. Everything else is based on judges, and many times you can lose points because of personal bias. For example, French figure skater, apologies if I don't say her name right, it's Surya, Surya, Bonlay, or Bonnet, Bonally. She is a Black athlete famous for doing an illegal backflip on the ice. So she would literally do backflips while she was ice skating, but she was landing on 2 feet. And by landing a jump on 2 feet, it becomes an illegal move. And so she was warned at the 1998 Olympics to not do this move. The judges already didn't like her. She's a French skater. She's Black. She doesn't look like the other skaters because she has like a stronger build. She was already losing points for stuff, and they were like, do not do this backflip. It is an illegal move. You cannot do it. And she was like, haha, I'm going to do it anyway. But she landed on 1 foot specifically. She already knew that they were going to take points away from her, that she wasn't going to win. She was already 6th place. She ended up falling to 10th place. One of the reasons is because when she landed on her 1 foot and finished her entire showcase, she was facing the audience. She put her back to the judges, which is completely unacceptable, but she knew she wasn't going to win. So despite the legality of the move, she was still scored way lower than everyone else, causing her to lose.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
the parallel that comes to mind for me immediately was like the whole Simone Biles controversy
Yeah.
in gymnastics at the most recent Olympics, where they're like, nobody else is able to do that, so that's
So you can't do it.
illegal. Which
Yeah.
is like
And like there's
insane.
We
Well-
can't give you the points that's actually worth because there's no way that anyone else can beat you then. It's like, yeah, no, that's the point. That's why I would
Yeah,
do
like-
these things.
and
Like-
the thing is like with that particular skater, it's like her athleticism was way ahead of everyone else. So her athletic score versus her artistry score was going to be skewed, which is why they do it that way, because a skater might be super athletic but not super artistic. And so the idea is that those two scores would even out in the long run, but they just kind of used it against her in that particular case. And that's just talking about women's. We're mostly going to be focusing on men's skating, and men's single skating in the last few years has really been about who can land the most quads. The quad is like what all men's skaters are trying to do. Quad spins are when they have 5 full rotations, which is outrageous. Like it just be able to spend that much. I know it's quad and it's not 4. I can see
Okay.
James's face.
For addressing, yeah, thank you for addressing that.
It's you land on the 5th one. So American men's skater Nathan Chen is kind of like the skating darling of men's skating right now. And he is like the quad king. He is able to land more quads in competition than anyone else ever has. In competition, he has landed a toe loop, a salchow, a loop, a flip, and a lutz, each having 5 rotations. Plus, in 2018, he was able to add 8 single quad rotations across the ice during his program. That is insanity. To do 1 in competition 20 years ago was almost unheard of. Women don't really do quads traditionally, but men are getting this stronger and stronger every year. And now it's basically become like who can do the most. There have been some juniors in national competitions that are getting close, And in some practices, there are videos of people landing more than 8 quads in a program, but no one's done it in competition except for Nathan.
It feels
So
how Aroldis Chapman used to be the only person throwing 100 miles an hour, and now like you suck if you're coming out of the bullpen and you can't hit 100 miles an hour.
yeah, it's like the level of sport has changed over time so much. Like if you look at some of like video from early figure skating Olympics, they're doing like cute little waltz jumps and they're getting gold medals. Like it is nothing like it was 70 years ago. Besides just the athleticism of the quads that are being added, the artistry of men's skating has really grown over time. From the music to the costumes to the types of moves that have been added, much has changed since the first figure skating world championship, which is happening in 1896, was the very first one. And a lot of that has to do with the person I'm going to talk about today, who is Rudy Galindo. He was born September 7th, 1969. It's like nice. He is both a Virgo and Latino. Virgos are generous and willing to help others, and this is probably also true of Latinos. Don't want to make any assumptions.
I'm glad we're finally getting into horoscopes on this podcast. It's perfect.
It's necessary. So his parents were Jess and Margaret. He's Mexican on his father's side, and he's the youngest of 3 with an older brother named George and a sister named Laura. So figure skating, it's a very expensive sport. Besides being a little bit confusing about the scoring system and all of the judging that has to go into it, it can cost anywhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a year to be a competitor.
A year.
A year.
That's
It is an
insane.
incredibly expensive sport. I tried to look it up and see like what's the most expensive sport, and everything says hockey, but I'm not sure if these articles were even looking at figure skating as a sport. So that's going to account for coaches, club fees, ice time, travel, costumes, choreography, skates, training, and more, because there's a lot more that goes into it besides those things. But it can be anywhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a year to be a figure skater.
Yeah, that's crazy. Hockey is like 10 grand a year for high school hockey. I'm sure if you do travel stuff, it gets more than that, but I don't think it gets to that much.
It's kind of outrageous. So competition level figure skaters typically have 8 levels before they start to learn jumps. But some jumps cannot be taught without custom skates. To level up in skating, you have to have custom skates because of the chance of injury to both your feet and your ankles when landing. So custom skates can cost anywhere between $800 and $1,000 for the boot and another $1,000 for the blades. Those have to be sharpened and often replaced because the ankle support has to keep some kind of rigidity. This has caused many skaters to quit skating before they even move on to the free skate level. This is a sport not many people can do, and many families have to sacrifice to let their children continue to perform. This was very true for Rudy's family. Rudy has described his family as living in extreme poverty. His father would use his entire paycheck from truck driving to pay for skating. Eventually, that led to them moving into a trailer. They had an option to buy a house, but they used all of their savings to let Rudy and his older sister skate. Everything in this family went into his career. Rudy was very close to his family, and they were very supportive, both financially and emotionally. Rudy said in his autobiography, Icebreaker, that Laura often drove him to practice years before she was old enough to have a driver's license. Laura gave up her career in part to support Rudy and to work to support their family. She acted as his coach during the 1996 championship season. Back to their childhood, Laura started skating first. They're from San Jose, and their parents didn't want them hanging out on the streets, so they signed her up for ice skating classes, and Rudy would go with her. And he fell in love with it and started taking classes as well. In 1982, he started skating with his first coach, whose name was Jim Kulik. He is a former champion, and he was the best coach in the Bay Area. He had his first competitions as a single junior skater. He did really well. He was showing like great talent and drive, and like everyone was just like, this is going to be something special, which is why Laura really would step back from skating later on. The whole family really supported him for this. When he was 13, he met Christy Yamaguchi, a known name. If you know anything about figure skating at all, you might have heard her. You remember that guy. So he was 13 and she was 11 when they met. She was skating at the same ice skating club as him. And when Rudy was 13, he was watching his sister skate pairs in her class. And pairs, sure you can figure that out, is when 2 people are skating together. It is not the same as ice dance, which is another facet of figure skating. Pairs is much more about the athleticism, but it still has the artistry in it. It's just not dancing. So he was seeing how well Christy was skating on the ice, and he approached his coach, Jim, and was like, I want to skate pairs with Christy. The coach didn't take it seriously at first because Rudy is pretty short. He would only grow up to be about 5'6". On my paper, it says short king, 5'6". Uh, so he didn't think that he could be a pair skater. You need to be really strong because you're going to be throwing these girls across the ice. But because Rudy and Christy were almost the same height, they were able to do things that other people were not able to do. So Rudy really persisted in trying to convince his coach that this was a good idea, and Jim would eventually arrange a meeting with Christy's mom. Rudy would say in his autobiography that single skating is extremely isolating, and I thought it might be fun to work with someone, especially someone who was as full of energy and charm as Christy. So they skated together a lot through their teen years. In high school, they were skating 6 to 8 hours every single day before and after school. But Rudy would eventually stop going to traditional high school because the principal wouldn't accommodate his practices. So he would hire a tutor to come 2 days a week to teach him between practices. He got his GED. As a skating pair, they performed side-by-side jump sequences, which as a difficulty is not done. It's a triple flip into a triple toe. So that is 3 rotations one way in jumps, and then 3 more rotations the other way, happening 3 times. It has not been seen at all since. No one has done this since then. They would win the 1986 Junior National Champions in pairs. Oh, sorry, U.S. National Champions in 1986. 1988 was the World Junior Champions. In 1989, they won the U.S. National Champions again, but things started to get really hard during that time. Rudy was incredibly creative. He was driving a lot of their routines and throwing himself into pair skating with everything he had. But the first signs of trouble were with Christy's mother, Carol. She was concerned that their partnership might not last because Rudy was short.
Rudy's shortness was what allowed them to do these routines that are winning.
Yes, but that's in juniors. So
Okay.
when they were getting to the adult pairs, there was some concern that they wouldn't be able to hold up the same way. So to convince the Yamaguchis that he was completely dedicated to pairs, he actually gave up his careers as a single skater. Most of the time, pair skaters are also skating as singles and winning competitions, and he wanted them to know, no, I'm very dedicated to this, so he gave up that career. Things continued to be very tough for him, though. In 1989, Jim Hulick would die. AIDS was affecting so many people during the 1980s, and entire communities were lost. Officially, Jim Hulick died from colon cancer at age 38, but it was cancer that was associated with HIV. He had coached Rudy and Christy in the national championships only 16 days before his death, and checked himself into the hospital soon after that. This is from his obituary. He had said that the highlight of his coaching career occurred at the Baltimore Arena when his 17 and 19-year-old students skated a near perfect long program to win the National Senior Pairs Championship, and then he was gone. And the skaters had to move past this. It would obviously rattle the pair and cause changes in their dynamic. This was the first major tragedy for Rudy. He already had a pretty tough teenage years, living in poverty, being supported by his parents as much as they could. His mother was dealing with a lot of mental health struggles, and losing a coach that you spent 12 hours a day with every single day. He was living with the Yamaguchis at this point most of the time, and this was one of the biggest male figures in his life, and now he's gone, and he was gone very young. He's only 38 years old. But right after that, they would win again in the 1990s United States National Championships for pairs. But soon the two would end their pairs careers together so that Christy could focus on singles in preparation for the 1992 Olympics. Rudy was devastated and unfocused. He had given up his career, mostly because he had hoped to compete in the pairs competition at the Olympics. But because he had sacrificed his singles, he was not in form to compete in the Olympics. He didn't qualify. It would be very difficult for Rudy to find another pairs partner at his age and stage in his career. So his only choice was to return to singles if he wanted to continue skating competitively. He would hire a new singles coach. His name was Rick Inglesi, Inglesi. Did I say that?
Your guess is as good as mine, but it sounds right.
I would
Sounds
assume
right.
silent N. Just a guess. Just a guess.
Okay. Well, he began working on his triples jumps again, because you don't really do triple jumps in pairs. You do the paired jumps like I was talking about, but the triple jumps are what pretty much all men are focusing on before they started focusing on quads. closer to 2000s. In 1993, his father dies of a heart attack. And in 1994, his older brother, George, would die from complications of HIV. He was working really hard, but the tragedy of losing both his father and brother so quickly were just in the forefront of his mind. And he would finish 7th at the 1994 Nationals and 8th at the 1995 Nationals. He does not qualify for Worlds those years. He was completely frustrated with his inability to finish in the top 3, and he considered quitting the sport entirely. Rudy's coach had learned from the skating judges that they disapproved of the fact that he was effeminate, and that was affecting his scores. Judges at the time are going to be incredibly biased towards that. He does not look like the traditional male figure skater, like All-American. He is Mexican. He's short. He had long hair at the time and earrings, and they did not approve of that at all. In 1995, his second coach died. Rudy would say in his autobiography that he was the kind of guy that was up at 3 a.m. He did his workout at home, he cleaned his house, he went grocery shopping, and he was on the ice at 5:30 in a remarkably good mood. It was no secret that Rick was gay, which was important to me. You spend a lot of time with your coach, and I wanted to be completely comfortable with the people around me. So he has now lost his first coach to colon cancer, influenced by HIV, his father to a heart attack, his brother to complications from HIV, and now his second coach to HIV.
Okay, so you've answered that question then.
Yes. This one was another. So after losing so many people that he loved, Rudy was struggling. Figure skating is a career for the young, and at 25 years old, Rudy's body and soul were feeling the effects of the daily stress and pressure. He would take an 8-month break. Taking off any time from skating can have a huge detrimental effect. The way your body changes when you don't skate can preclude you from skating at the same level. Even taking a summer off could completely change a career. After finishing 8th at the 1995 U.S. Championship, Rudy would take an 8-month break. His family's history of mental health issues catching up to him and causing him to fall into a depression. But things started to get a little bit better because in 1996, Rudy found out that the United States Championship was going to be happening in San Jose in his hometown. And he really wanted to take this chance and opportunity to perform in front of his mom. She was not able to travel anymore, and it was really important to him. And so after he took this 8-month break, his sister would take over as his coach. So Laura was there supporting him again. About 6 weeks before the U.S. Nationals, Rudy comes out in sport columnist's book. Her name is Christine Brennan. Her book's called Inside Edge, A Revealing Journey into the Secret World of Figure Skating. He becomes the first openly gay men's champion. He is the first figure skater to still be in competition that comes out. So he is like the gay figure skater at this point. And people were really concerned about this. In his autobiography, Icebreaker, he shared that he was oftentimes unmotivated due to the lack of support from his fellow skaters, judges, and skating officials. He didn't fit the mold of the all-American figure skating hero. Having some coaches try to dull his sparkle by cutting his hair and giving him more conservative costumes. But when Rudy came out as gay, many thought this was a mistake in a sport that is described as clean-cut and all-American. Rudy would say, "I guess I was just ahead of my time, but I wanted to be me, and to be out of the box, to be over the top. And some judges back then, well, they wanted a certain type of skater."
I'm glad he said ahead of his time because, like, not that I know enough about figure skating to, like, make giant sweeping remarks, but certainly I would say the way that figure skating is generally viewed now in terms of its flamboyance and not all-Americanness and, frankly, its homosexuality.
What I want
Just
to
think of
say
Johnny
about that.
Weir.
Yeah, who
so-
fucking rocks, but, like, is clearly a very gay man.
So I think what thing I would say to think about that. So I went to an all women's college, and the joke about that is like you go there to find a husband later, or you're a lesbian. And so there is a huge push at women's colleges to not be gay. Like, don't talk about it, like, because there's so much of a stigma to it. And I think because figure skating was seen as so feminine, male figure skaters tried very hard to push the masculinity aspect. They would not really wear sparkly costumes. They would very much be almost in suits. Like they would really try to be like a manly man.
They got me butchered up.
It's
Yeah,
actually
like they were
hilarious to
really
think about it that way in those terms. Like you really we have to offset what we're doing.
I'm
with how
not
we
gay,
look.
man. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
My shirt
I
that
mean,
says
that's-
I'm not gay. Like, why are you asking all these questions about it?
Just end every performance by using your skate to shotgun a beer.
Right, exactly. And like I think there's another thing with skaters in general. So like you're skating on the same rinks that hockey players are going to be playing at. You don't even have the same type of skates as them. So it's like you can't even relate the way that you're skating to someone who plays hockey, which is extremely masculine. So there's like this weird world that you're both living in the same building, but you are not the same type of person. And so trying to push that aspect of yourself really meant something to people. So he comes out right before the 1996 US World Champions San Jose, and this was like a huge deal. So he's 26 years old. He's incredibly old for a figure skater, which I know we were saying before. Like, I'm 31. I started figure skating at 25. So it's like your body is changing. You're holding your weight in different places. He was like, this is probably going to be my last one. I want to do it in front of my mom. I want to do it in my hometown. And it's in the ice rink that he grew up learning skating at. So it was like really important to him. He didn't have like unrealistic expectations. He had taken almost a full year off, but he had hoped to place in the top 5 so that he'd be on TV. That was literally it. So in competitions, you have 2 programs. You have your short program and your long program, which is also sometimes called your free skate. They're usually both to some song. Your choreography has something to do with the music, like you're dancing to it. Short programs are usually around 2 minutes. Long programs can be up to 7. That is an incredibly long time to be on the ice. It is very tough on your body, and some competitions make you do them back to back. Nationals usually doesn't. So he had done a really clean short program. Like he had hit most of his stuff. He performed to Swan Lake, but he was in 3rd place. Like it was clean, but it was fine. Like he wasn't wowing anybody too much. But the crowd was really excited because like hometown boy, like they were like really rooting for him. Todd Eldridge, he was like the most traditional male skater like of 1996. Like he was what everybody looked at like that's what a male skater should be. He's very traditionally masculine. He's super tall at 5'8". Like so like he's just a really great skater. He actually briefly coached Rudy during that time period after his last coach died, tried to masculine him up a little bit. He was the one that made him cut his hair, but it just wasn't working out. And so Todd was leading after the long program. He like was at 1st place, but his performance didn't have as many difficult triple jumps. Rudy's had like a bunch of triple jumps planned into it. Eldridge's did not. In particular, Rudy had 2 triple combinations. So it was a 3 jump into a 3 jump essentially. So those combinations are back to back. You can't waver. You have to land them. And remember, you're landing on 1 foot. So you have to really plant your skate into the ice. That would make his program more technically difficult than Todd's. And if he could skate a clean program, he could take the lead. So he performed to, is it Ava Maria? Or, do you know what I'm talking about?
Ave Maria, I believe.
How do you say it?
Ave Maria.
Ave Maria. He would perform to Ave Maria for his exhibition free skate program. This is from his autobiography again. As I approached the takeoff point, I lifted my arms and jumped. 3.5 revolutions and a spin. Seconds later, I landed smoothly, facing backwards, and then took off again on my toe of my skate for the triple toe loop. Spin, spin, spin. The audience roared so loud I could hardly hear the music. As I landed, I thought, that was way too easy. Rudy's flawless performance led to a high technical mark and 2 perfect 6 scores for his artistic style. So thinking back to when we talked about the scoring system, before 2004, it is out of 6. And of the 9 judges, 2 of them gave him a perfect score for his artistry. Everyone else gave him between a 5.7 and a 5.9. This was an outrageous score. When he came off the ice from this historic winning free skate, he yelled out, "I love you, Dad. I love you, George, Jim, Rick." He was calling out to the 4 men who he had loved the most. Makes me cry every time. I watched the performance right before we got on, and I'm just like crying. A New York Times reporter described it as one of the greatest upsets ever accomplished in American skating. Ann Killian, a sports columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle, said, "I think one reason why he skated with such joy and freedom that night was because he had already been through so much. It seemed like he was happy with who he was, and he was energized by skating in his hometown." With this win, he also became the first Mexican-American national champion. NBC News reported that he is the United States' most decorated Latino figure skater. He also becomes the oldest figure skater to ever win the U.S. Nationals in 70 years. The last time it had happened was in 1951. So he did qualify for Worlds in 1996, and he took home bronze. He's still doing great. And then he decided to retire from competition. He became a media darling and he went pro. Going pro in figure skating means you get to now do dances, tours, competitions that don't result in prizes, but have more to do with just your performance. And so he starts to go on tour with Tom Collins's Champions on Ice. And that made a lot of decisions for him. A lot of people were very surprised. He just won nationals. He got bronze in worlds. Like, you're going to go to the Olympics, but he decided that he wanted to opt out of the Olympics, mostly because of financial reasons. He had been supported so thoroughly by his family, but his father was dead, his brother was dead, his sister was spending all of her money to support his skating career and their mother. And he knew if he went pro, he would be able to support them in ways that he could never do before. He went on a world tour with Champions on Ice, and he said, my family sacrificed so much, and I wanted to be able to provide for them and do wonderful things for them. He publishes that autobiography in 1997. It's called Icebreaker. And things started to feel brighter in his professional career. He continued to skate and perform after this book came out. And on December 12th, 1998, Rudy became the first skater broadcast on a U.S. television network doing a specifically gay-themed program. He performed to Over the Rainbow. He used a sequined rainbow flag as part of his costume, and sports commentator Dick Button explained on air pretty matter-of-factly that this was the symbol of the gay and lesbian movement. And just, if you look it up, it is very funny. He's just very monotone.
I would have loved it if it didn't explain why it was very gay and just said, trust us, it was very gay. And then everyone just had to imagine, okay, what is this very gay program?
A rainbow-themed Judy Garland performance commentated by Dick Button is pretty gay.
And he really...
And we love that. And we love that.
And we love that for him. And he really leaned into it. In 1998, he had an exhibition program to a Village People medley, explicitly referencing his sexual orientation. He skated to In the Navy, Macho Man, and YMCA. It was a celebration with deliberately flouncy pirouettes and unashamed femininity.
I love it. He'd been through so much shit. Be you. Be you. I love it.
Be you. Absolutely. So on January 12th, 1999, Rudy would have a cameo as himself with lines on the sitcom Will and Grace, with a plot line centering on an evening with Champions on Ice. The episode was called Will on Ice. Will's friends bond over their favorite skaters, Michelle Kwan and Rudy, whom one character calls my hero. He's the gay one, to which another character responds, one? In the year 2000, after a handful of beautiful and successful years, Rudy was forced to withdraw from the Goodwill Games after coming down with viral pneumonia. This led to Rudy's diagnosis of HIV. He was devastated. After losing so many people to this disease, Rudy told the world he would become a spokesperson to what someone living with HIV can be, and he thrived. So, James, you'll love this. Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, on behalf of the House of Representatives, presented Rudy with the U.S. flag that had recently flown over the Capitol building and declared him a national treasure. So Rudy would break his femur on his left side in 2003 and was forced to undergo a hip replacement surgery. It was very tough on his body, and it would take years to fully recover, but he would continue to perform with Champions on Ice until they went out of business in 2007. During that time, in 2006, he was a judge on WeTV's Skating's Next Star, which was created by his former partner, Christy Yamaguchi. Currently, he is a coach. Among his students is Christy's daughter, Emma. Christy has said, my daughter loves working with him, so it's like our lives have come full circle. In a way, he is like an extended family member. I'm very proud of him because he has never been afraid to be who he was. He's always been like, this is who I am, so why pretend? Rudy was inducted into the San Jose Hall of Fame in 2011 and the U.S. Figure Skating Hall of Fame in 2012. In 2014, in the Winter Olympic Games, there were no openly gay male skaters, but in 2022, there were 8 across the singles, pairs, and dance categories. Rudy has said that he feels he paved the way for other Olympic skaters like Johnny Weir and Adam Rippon and skier Gus Kenworthy by forcing the sport to acknowledge LGBT athletes. Rudy coming out was especially courageous because under the old scoring system, figure skating was a much more subjective sport than it is today. Judges could score him lower because they were uncomfortable with his identity. Apologies if I don't pronounce this name right, it's French. Guillaume Cizère A French ice dancer said on Instagram after Russian judges docked points for him looking cold with a female partner. Don't let ignorant people tell you how much of a man or a woman you are. What makes you a man, a woman, a non-binary, or anything in between has nothing to do with your sexual orientation, and even less with your abilities, your value, your skill, or the level of respect that you deserve. Him and his partner Gabriella went on to become the 2022 Olympic champions. Today, you can find Rudy on Instagram and Twitter, where he is lovely and supportive to any skater he comes across, including me when I was learning to skate a few years ago. If you do follow him on Twitter, you will get some amazing motivation, like in his tweet from December 23rd, 2021, just getting the 3 Bs today: Bloodwork, Botox, and boosted. And that is my entire story about Rudy.
It's a very strong closing argument, I have to say.
Jesse, I'm not sure how much research you did on.
I did like 3 hours of research yesterday.
Well, specifically for Rudy, absolutely, but into what really gets our guy gears going. We have the first guy to do something. We have an icon here. We have overcoming personal tragedy. We have the partnering with another well-known guy. This is like the great guy pair. We have the crossover into the entertainment industry with the Will and Grace appearance. I mean, you're ticking all of our boxes here.
We have several tragic deaths, just like an absurd amount of deaths.
Yeah.
And of course, for me specifically, any Latino guy is an automatic yes vote. So
That's true. This is your makeup for Scott Gomez. This is able to fill the void, shaped exactly like Scott Gomez. It turns out that 5'6" Rudy can fit into. His name's fucking Rudy. That's perfect.
I love it. My new favorite Rudy Rudiger. It actually turned out to be an asshole. I think the movie was kind of propaganda for Notre Dame. So Rudy Galindo.
Rudy Galindo and then Sean Astin. That's the top 2 Rudy.
We actually have to make a basement for Rudy Gobert. So low down, not even on the same scale.
Xavier, any final comments or questions on your end?
You know what? Skaters, I feel like, is such an incredibly difficult sport to do, just because you think about it, you have to start super early with an insane amount of practice. Mm-hmm. Unlike other, sports, you have a very, very, very limited window most of the time, Rudy showing that not always the case, to do anything, but you're not actually even making money during your peak. So you have to hope that you can somehow make money afterwards, either as a coach or touring.
A choreographer.
It is a thing that you can only do if you truly love to skate. Like, it's extremely hard to have any sort of tangible benefit. 99.9% of skaters will never win anything, and they're not making money. It's not like, the regular guy basketball player who still makes millions of dollars as the 9th man off the bench. So I do really love recognition to figure skaters and other sports that have similar levels of dedication. I really liked hearing about Rudy.
I also liked very much that we had the circular sacrifice for family. I love that it came back around after the dad gave up the whole paycheck, after the sister gave up her career. He comes up and he gives up the 1996 Olympics, which
98.
he was 98, sorry, 90, and he was guaranteed a spot, right? Like, if he wanted to do it, he could have done it. And he passed that up then to support the family because he'd already had his moment. Fucking great. That was an excellent story. God damn it. Incredible.
And I do really recommend looking up his 1996 performance, or the other ones that I talked about, really any of his performances. His costuming is always incredible. There is no one at that time that had the strength, the flexibility, or just body control that he does. A good skater should make it look easy. When I was learning how to skate, they always said you should look like you're gliding on water, and you should look like your body movements are in water. And he is never rattled. It is wild to see someone like that skate. Seeing the skaters now, there's a few male skaters now that are absolutely incredible, but it is a very different sport today. The judging system has completely changed. The way costuming is much more flamboyant than it was in the 1990s. So just like looking up his performances, I really do recommend that.
And props again for him making skating flamboyant. God, I can't picture what figure skating would look like if they weren't being flamboyant.
Boring. It's very strong.
Well, Diaz, Xavier, I don't know about you guys, but it sounds to me like the Guy-bunal may have reached a decision.
I mean, I don't. Is there any more to even say?
I believe it's a call of acclamation.
So via call of acclamation, thank you, Jesse, for opening our eyes to the icon, Will and Grace guest star. I'm not going to say better half. I will say half of the pair with Christy Yamaguchi, now to be inducted into our illustrious Hall of Guy, Val, Joe, Rudy Galindo. Welcome into the Hall of Guy.
Yay.
Incredibly well done, my love. It's been an absolute joy having you on. But
was
man,
fun.
I guess I gotta get to making dinner for us soon. Fellas, I mean, we got the Phillies to watch. Do we have anything else coming up that we need to think about sports-wise?
Well, just again, to reiterate, the Phillies will be done before anybody listens to this.
True, yes. No, Phil's in 7.
And yet again, I'm calling my shot. Congratulations, as you are listening to this, to the 2022 World Series champion, Philadelphia Phillies. It was really crazy in that Game 6 when that one thing happened, and I think we all know what the key moment
that other one
was. But holy shit, what a performance. Congratulations, Phillies.
Diaz, can I ask you for one true called shot? I want to see it when the Phillies win. Game 7, bottom of the 9th. What pitcher is on the mound for the Phillies as the final out is recorded?
I'm going to say that Alvarado and Dominguez are going to be used in high leverage spots earlier in the game. They will not be available. Give me Aaron Nola out of the pen, getting his redemption for shit starts. Aaron Nola gets the last out. And Alec Boehm is going to fucking love this place because he gets the game-winning RBI.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Because, I mean, it's last game of the season, Brent. Can't hold anything back now.
Xavier, you got anything?
It's something you won't like because it's about the Spurs, so we can talk about this off air.
Well, if that's the case, then let's get off of here and make me more miserable about the Spurs. I'm James.
I'm the not this special guest, Xavier.
Am I the other special guest?
You're the true special guest.
I'm the true special guest, Jesse.
I'm Diaz, and as famous Philadelphian Benjamin Franklin once said, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I got it.